Hello, everybody. The objective today is to look at certain megaliths. This is not one of them, but the reason why I'm putting it on here is because I want you to recognize the face and also the patterns around it and see that the megaliths that we're going to put are going to have a lot of these symbols. These megaliths come from several places in Africa. Uh, I might include Egypt, but I don't have to. But in order to show a potential connection between certain African lands and them carving rocks made of different materials. Some are made of volcanic ash or volcanic rock, not ash, but volcanic rock that they carve different African symbols on for us to see. Some of the oldest ones have been thought to have been carved. Now, keep in mind, it's a rock, have been thought to have been carved like 2000 BC. Some have definitely been traced to about 200 BC, especially those from Nigeria. One of the things that you will see is spirals. For some reason, human beings a long time ago, this is all over the world, but this one's from Kenya. People from all over the world long time ago used to draw spirals on everything, whether it be their faces, whether it be on rock art, whether it be on caves on the ground, even putting spiral rocks on the ground and just leaving them there. We find a lot of them there, some of them being disturbed. So it's quote unquote alleged that they were spirals. But these spirals are thought all over the world to represent a entering into not the underworld, but another world, a parallel universe, so to speak. And we see in this Khoisan version more spirals, again, probably linked to religion, maybe not the same context as the other one. We also see the stone shaped ones, and then we see the final ones that I'm going to show. But let's get to the megaliths. These Ecom monoliths, as they're known, based on the town name Ecom, which comes from the Ikoi people who live in Nigeria in that area. Now, something you will immediately notice is that these megaliths or monoliths have faces on them, and they have the spirals that I was talking about, and they also have other basic African features which you see all over the place. Conservative dates say that they created or carved these stones in 200 CE, which would be 200 AD. And that's very good to think about, but the thing that's more important is that looking at the Ikoi people, you can actually see why they would carve these symbols, and this is how we can relate it to other parts of Africa. Looking at this Ikoi gear used in rituals, you can see there on the side of the face that they have the spirals. And remember, you don't tend to have spirals in that region unless that's your culture, because they tend other cultures I've shown you, like in Egypt and other places, they have cuts that are or horizontal to each other. Here they have the spiral on the side of the head, and they have spiral on the hair. Now, some of you will have realized that they have a very specific shape to them. Now, the reason why they have the shape is because of, well, this is thought to be the case. The reason why they have this shape is because it's representative of a phallic symbol. And you will see that this is another continuation. Remember, in Great Zimbabwe, you have that phallic symbol coming out of the ground as well, which was blown up. And so now it looks like it was, people thought that there was something inside, but it was also another phallic symbol. And you see everywhere in Africa with African dolls and stuff like that, those are phallic symbols. Africans like doing that for some reason. Even Egypt does this, where they have a bunch of things that represent phallic symbols. Now, I don't know if this woman would feel as comfortable leaning on this rock if she knew what it was representing. Here's some more examples of these megaliths. But wait, these aren't the megaliths from Nigeria. These are from another area altogether. These megaliths, which also resemble phallic symbols, are from Ethiopia. And they're very, very different in terms of location than Nigeria, but yet they still carry some symbols which you can recognize are very strictly African. These bands that go around the let's call it the neck area, and then this crossing over here. But what possesses people to make and take so much time in creating phallic symbols with O faces and random symbols on them? Well, we can see from Wikipedia, which we're going to read later, why it is thought generally, which is why I like Wikipedia. It doesn't tell you the truth necessarily, it tells you what people generally think. But if we look here, I'm going to give you my opinion. One, the one in the middle is not a monolith or a megalith. It's a Leidenberg head made of clay, and it's from South Africa. And the reason I'm showing you is because I want to show you that there's clearly a similarity between these three in the way they look. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're related, but again, I'm going to show you Wikipedia that most people believe that it had to do with something connected because you find these all over the place. And it relates to these spirals that I'm talking about, stone circles, all this other type of stuff that is out there. So, first, all of them are phallic symbols, like I said. And like I said, it's not just these, it's in many things. Most things you will see, like, you ever see people carrying those maces? Those two are seen as phallic symbols. You see a lot of things in African culture are seen as phallic symbols. The obelisks that you see in Egypt, they represent phallic symbols. It's not the only thing they represent. They also represent the sun and all the other stuff. But one of their descriptions is that of a phallic. So, you know that. Now, I don't want to give the impression that they were all like that because some of them have other drawings on them or other carvings on them. And, I should probably go back to that thing where I separate things in different forms of art, the five arts that I talk about. But this is one of them, and this would be visual art. And you can tell that here in the visual art of the swords, they sort of represent a Christian worldview. Now, remember, crosses existed in Africa way before Christianity came over. And it's actually like a cross being a Christian symbol. It was not something new to the earth in general. Crosses that existed all over the world. But in Africa, it was especially, it was special because crosses existed to a meaning that is similar to each other from Africa to all the way down to from North Africa all the way down to Southern Africa. They sort of had these symbols that are similar, and they had to do mostly with the stars and shields and stuff like that, and family and mother, father, stuff like that. I should redo a video on that because I think people have probably forgotten by now. But as you can see, there are also other pagan symbols that are all over these. Like I said, some of those neck things, you can see them around. Some of these images from this culture, the Ikoi people, can be pretty scary, downright scary, but don't notice that. Notice how the face is very similar, especially that open mouth thing. You notice the Leidenberg head, the Ethiopian one, and the other one, they don't have a closed mouth. They always have this slightly opened mouth for some reason. I don't know why. I just call it like an open face. So there you go. But then you can see the spirals with the hair. You can see the many grooves on the head representing a form of headgear or really hair. And then, the cone for a neck. This is not rare or special in Africa. It's actually very common, but it does tell you how far back the art style goes. So whenever you look at something in Africa and you think, oh, this must have come no, it came like thousands of years ago, and it carried on throughout the history. Now, if only we could read them. We actually can't read the symbols because even from one place in Africa to another, they could change dramatically. It's like a language. It doesn't help knowing that you're looking at alphabets if you have no translation for each alphabet, at least a few. If you have a few and you know a couple words, then you can translate it. But without that, we're kind of lost. Like I said, we're going to read from Wikipedia. So here's what it says, talking about the ones especially in Ethiopia. The existence of stelae, dolmens, tumuli, stone pillar, and stone circles stone have been reported from North Africa and West Africa, East Africa. Megalithic tradition was one of the common practices in most part of Africa. The megaliths have direct or indirect related to ritual activities. The ritual activities conducted by the Bodi peoples in the Omo Valley, southern Ethiopia, can be mentioned as a good example. The Bodi are one of the pastoral peoples who perform ritual activities related to stone platform. It would have a socio-economic role among the people who practice of such activities. Now, given this, we know again that the ritualistic thing is believed to have just been a typical thing. So, did did the megaliths from Africa proper, and as you can see there, it says it's common in North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, are they responsible for the obelisks? Now, we don't really have to guess in this case, but usually in history we have to guess. But you can tell in Egypt that they were somewhat interested in megaliths as far back, and you can see this with Nabta and the calendar and standing things upright. And of course, I will add that they did not miss the fact that it was based on phallic symbols, as I'm just going to say it. And if we continue and we look at the obelisks, a giant rock with carvings in it. Now, something that a lot of people don't talk about, and I will completely say this is my idea, is that maybe the way that the Egyptians came to starting to carve faces into things and blah 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 was it came from this type of art where they would find a giant rock and then they'd start to carve it, without mortar and stuff, which is probably why they used such big blocks whenever they were going to make their statues, in that you get big blocks and you just carve around the block. And even in the cases of statues where they would like first they would if you know the method, they'd first stack the things on top of each other, and then all you have to do is just break it down, right? Break down the mats from it, and it makes it very easy because you have four giant blocks and you just start carving it out, and now you've got a statue. So maybe it came from that, and then of course the technology started to develop further, and they started using architecture rather than building straight from this method. But remember that this Ethiopian church was also built the same way, in that it was carved, and there's something magical about taking a solid block and hollowing it out or putting carving things on it. It's almost like you didn't change the nature of the thing. It doesn't feel as not part of the environment as, just taking blocks or taking, I don't know, even sand and then heating it up and then forming bricks and building a building. That feels like it's outside of nature, whereas some of these things, it's like you're just carving rocks. So of course there are certain obelisk like things in Ethiopia, and you can see there's the sun right at the top, just like the one in Egypt is representing the sun, and then it's a phallic symbol. But not only that, it's got this building carvings on it, and it sort of builds. It's almost like a giant build. If you look at it in Africa, if you look at a lot of these things, it's like take a giant stone, carve it, and get something, and it means probably more to those people than a lot of things that you can build one by one. You take it apart, put it together, you build it. Carving it up gives it more significance, and that probably has to do with the fact that these people don't look at symbols as if they're just symbols. They don't look at it like that thing there is a symbol, but more as they look as if the symbol itself has magic contained within the symbol. And so you can't mess with the symbol. You don't play with the symbol itself. Now, saying someone's structure is a fertility symbol could be very disrespectful if you don't know the real answer, which is why it's always best to ask the people who created these things. And as we know, with African fertility dolls, I mean, they're fertility dolls, we know that they're phallic. And if you go ask the people who, well, if you go to Nigeria, go to Congo, go to whatever, they will tell you that that thing, the mace, is a phallic symbol. If you go different places, you will find this out. And even in ancient Egypt, if you scour the records, if you deep dive in the records, you will find this same explanation. So we know that it's not a accusation that they're phallic. We know that they were done on purpose. They're done for the reasons of fertility. Now, this symbol here in Zimbabwe used to look like this. There's no use for it. I mean, look at it. There's no use for it. That's why when the Europeans first got here, they bombed it, thinking that it had gold inside, which was a stupid mistake. Now, outside of the Nigerian ones, the general fertility symbols represent females, but you will see that it's more androgynous than that. Because, of course, if you look at this Ethiopian one that's cracked, that's a female, but remember, I told you it's a phallic symbol. And because it's a phallic symbol, that's a male thing. And you look here at all these zigzags. You see all those zigzags around. First, you'll notice that one sort of embodies the or takes is in the same area as the Egyptian one. So the one right, the first one with the wild hair, that's Egyptian. You can see the zigzags all over the sort of clothing. And if you look all the way down to the bottom, you can see a sort of mountain shape upside down. Yep, phallic. There's no other reason why that would exist in that way. But if you notice at the neck of this woman, you can see these bands or these neck rings, same as if you see the second one, which is um, a closer doll, fertility. Again, the shape is like this, and the third one, the very tiny one with the two bulbous things, that also represents fertility. And again, these are women. These are supposed to be representing women. The only one that represents a man is the Nigerian one. Now, why is that important? Well, you notice the shape is the same as that Zimbabwe thing that right there. And you can see how it can be very basic and very complicated depending on how they want to portray it. Now, I want to say the one in Egypt and the other ones also prove that it's female, and that's why the one in Great Zimbabwe, I believe, is also supposed to be a female, but the phallic shape is supposed to be male. And of course, you can watch a video on YouTube where the guy explains that where this was, only men were around that area. Or did he say it's only females? One of those two. But only one gender was allowed in that area. So why would I say that? Well, it's the shape. Wait a minute, what about the shape? You said it's phallic. Well, it is and it isn't. It is because it is, but then also you notice the bulbousness. You see where there's checkered patterns at the bottom of the woman in Egypt? That's supposed to represent women ball baiting their hips, how they sort of go around. And you notice here in the one in the closer one does the same thing, and the next one, and the one in Nigeria doesn't. It's more identifiable. Then you'll notice the one in Great Zimbabwe, it's phallic, but it also has this thing where at the, I'll call it hip area, it sort of moves out the way that a woman's body would rather than a man's. Now, these zigzag patterns, I don't even have to include this, but we can, is all over Africa. And they are connected with fertility. They're mainly connected with water and stuff like that. Lightning as well. Water, lightning, rain, all kinds of things, and you can see them all over Great Zimbabwe. These symbols, unlike a lot of other things in the past in other regions, are still alive today and still utilized today. You can see this woman is painting this one, basically bringing it to life for the Yam Festival. And these people use these in rituals all the time, and so they're still in use for real. And like everything else I showed you, they're also in use. I mean, even Great Zimbabwe, the reason why it's blocked out is because of, I don't know, but it's still valued by the people who live in that area, just like the hills all over Africa. We shall talk more about this, but let me return to Congo for a while.